Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast.
Hello, this is Thomas Hubert, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. Welcome to this week's podcast. This Wednesday, members of the IFA Grain Committee occupied the head office of the Department of Agriculture in Dublin. They wanted clarification on the proposed Tillage crisis fund for farmers who lost crops to bad weather during last year's harvest. My colleague Anthony Jordan joined them in Agriculture House.
I'm here with Liam Dunn, Chairman in Tillage in the IFA. Liam, what's going on here today?
We've come up here and occupied the offices in the Department of Agriculture. We've been very unhappy yesterday and today of the leaked information about the support fund for tillage farmers in the West that lost crop last harvest.
Which you believe is inadequate, is that correct?
The figures that have been leaked are inadequate, and we can't get confirmation, and we can't still get confirmation of a meeting with department officials. And the last time we met them was back in March. They agreed to sit down and do another meeting with us. That didn't happen. They sent the project to the Department of Finance, and there was some sort of an announcement yesterday that they were going ahead with a fund, but the leaked details of how that would be paid out are completely unacceptable and are certainly not up to the situation that we had the last time we were talking to the department officials.
Is that what triggered you to come down here today?
We've asked them yesterday and today to either clarify the situation or clarify exactly when we can sit down and meet with them, and they have been unable to do either. So we didn't see ourselves with any other option but to come down and make our feelings strongly felt.
How optimistic are you that you're going to get a meeting or kind of a face-to-face meeting with Minister Creed today?
There's no reason why we can't meet with the Minister or his officials either. Once they give us a definite date and time for meeting, that would satisfy us. But that would mean that they would hold off on details until after they meet with us. I mean, this is a scheme that we have worked on fairly seriously for the last almost a year now. And to finalise it without going through the final details with us is not acceptable. So we are completely unhappy. Some of the lads are very, very angry over it. Some farmers are hurting very seriously on the ground. People who had serious losses are carrying those losses now for a year. Now, the maximum payments that can be made are laid down by EU law and still won't sort the problem, but there would be a help. But what's been leaked is far short of the maximum possible payments, and that's what's angering people.
Liam, thank you very much. I'm here with John Daly from Ballinasloe, County Galway, John Carroll from Ardeen, County Louth, and Philip Tierney from Terry Glass in Tipperary. Lads, you're very, very welcome. I'll start with yourself, John. What's happening here today?
We're here today because of the lack of progress from, we'll say, we were meeting with the Department of Agriculture there all along from last December to the 3rd of March, and the promise is that we'll get some sort of funding to cover the weather loss that was last September and October in the harvest of especially spring barley. Since the 3rd of March we have no correspondence, no communication with them. They said they'd be back to us in a fortnight, and tensions are running high now among tillage farmers. A lot of tillage farmers are in desperate state. Some had to refinance machinery to get to sow crops again this year. They just don't realise how bad the financial state of the tillage farmer at the present time.
And John, I suppose, John Carroll, coming to you, what are your demands here today?
We're demanding an aid package that will help to replenish some of the losses of the 2016 harvest. With the heavy rain there was on the western seaboard, it was more than average. Look, there's a lot of crop losses there, and just try and get across to the department that we wanted to get a substantial, a sizable sum of money to help to get over this hump.
And you're hoping for a meeting with the Minister Creed today?
It is a meeting today, is what we want. Like we're just here today just to see when they come and meet with us and talk about it. That's what we want now today, you know.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
On Tuesday, Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent Amy Ford was at the Moore Park Open Day, and she caught up with Minister for Agriculture Michael Creed. She asked him for an update on the changes coming up with various schemes, starting with the new ANC maps.
Minister Creed, on ANC maps, how are they looking? Will they be out any earlier than 2018?
I would say probably not. I mean, we're still waiting for the finalised omnibus regulation, and that will confirm whether we have an extension and the duration for which we have an extension. There's a lot of stuff going on in the department. Originally, we expected that we would have had to meet a deadline for single farm payments in May of next year, and all maps will have to be finalised before then. If we get more discretion, there's plenty of other things the department can be doing.
Okay. On BDGP2, how soon can we expect news of that, or how many applied or anything
BDGP2, this is the most recent one, taking us over the 50,000. I don't exactly have a date, but I think they're well on the way in the processing of the applications. I don't have an exact date now.
Okay, brilliant. Glass payments?
They're virtually all done. They're virtually all done. I mean, the ones that are not are ones where we're waiting information back from farmers. But the one thing I would say in respect to glass balancing payments, we cannot pay the glass balancing payment until people submit their nutrient management plans.
On that, do you think the whole, I won't call it fiasco, but what happened with glass in the IT and everything, do you think there needs to be more communication maybe between the department and farmers on what exactly needs to be done?
Communication is always good, and we're always learning from these experiences, and we've had faults on our side, and we're not shy about putting our hands up when they happen. We're not infallible. We do have ambition to pay as quickly as we possibly can. Glass is extremely complicated. I don't want to go into it. It's been rehearsed several times, but we want to pay out the balancing payments now, but as part and parcel of the scheme, we can't pay it until people submit their nutrient management plans.
Chinese people coming to our plants?
Yeah, they're coming in the next month or two, I think. It's potentially a very rewarding market. We're satisfied that our systems meet the most rigorous and stringent from the point of view of food safety, consumer protection, etc. We just need to convince the Chinese that's the case, and we unfortunately don't control their timelines, but we're trying to exhort them in as many diplomatic ways as possible to come as quickly as possible and make decisions so that we can get on with it in that marketplace.
Perfect. Super. Thanks a lot.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
I'm here with my colleague Owen Lowry, agribusiness editor, and this week in the Irish Farmers Journal we have the audit we do of milk prices every year with KPMG. Owen, I suppose the first question every farmer wants to know is who paid the highest price last year?
Well, Thomas, there was a huge variation in prices last year across the 12 processors who took part in this review. Again, what we're seeing is the West Cork's performing. At the top of the league is Lissavard, paying a milk price of about 30.5 cents last year. And then it all goes all the way down to about 24.5 cents. So we're seeing a huge swing almost there of 7 pence. Cents a litre, which is a huge amount of money when it comes back to farm level. We have done figures this year based on a 5,000 litre cow, and what we can say is that there's about €300 of a difference between the top paying co-op and the lowest paying co-op. Now, that's very significant on a farm, especially in a year like 2016 where dairy markets were under pressure and farmers were under pressure also.
And at the same time, farmers are supplying the same milk more or less around the country. Why the differences in prices?
Yeah, I suppose what you could say is that all these co-ops and processors start off with an even playing field when the milk gets delivered into them. So what exactly is that difference accounted for? I suppose it comes down to a number of factors, some being the fats and protein content has a factor to play. The product mix that the co-op itself is in, and what that milk ends up being processed into. So we've seen some markets particularly strong, particularly for fats last year, whereas the powder markets, which are predominantly traded as commodities, that has been much more volatile over the last 18-24 months. And so they then impacted and didn't allow those co-ops to pay maybe that higher price. And the last point, I suppose, is the level of investment that co-ops have been making or have made in the past. Stainless steel costs money, and that money or the cost or the repayment of that ultimately has to come from the milk price over time. So I suppose yes, if your co-op is down at the lower end of the scale, if it is investing in its future and it is investing in developing and expanding its processing capacity, then in the longer term that may be a more positive and the milk price may move up.
And the farmers are not only suppliers, they're also shareholders. So how do the co-ops compare in terms of managing their accounts and returning a profit?
Yeah, it's quite interesting when we look at, I suppose, all aspects of it, because milk price is only one leg of the stool. You have to look at what the profitability, is in the co-op as well. What we did see in 2016 is that the market itself didn't return the prices that I suppose farmers expected or needed to deliver a profit and be sustainable. So in that case, what we saw, and I suppose thankfully, the co-ops are owned by farmers and they followed that co-op ethos where they supported prices to the tune of 1.5 to 2 cents according to most co-ops last year. Now, effectively what that meant is that the average price paid for milk last year was 27 cents across all our processors. So that meant that the market price was around 25 cents per litre. If we look at the average profitability level at co-op level, it works out about 1-2 cents. So it's a very thin margin business. What I suppose is really welcome to see is that there was capacity there within the co-op's financial performance to allow it to pay in a tough year to farmers that 1.5 to 2 cents.
Yeah, and weather the storm. Okay, thank you very much, Owen. We have all those details and where your co-op is ranking as far as 2016 prices and profitability are concerned, all in this week's Irish Farmers Journal.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Last week, Bord Bia held a meeting to update the companies taking part in its Brexit barometer. Anthony Jordan talked to some of the agribusiness leaders at the event, starting with the Chief Executive of Dairy Gold, Jim Wolfe.
Well, I think in the context of where we are at this point is really we're looking at the worst case scenario, and we factor in the worst case scenario as a hard Brexit, meaning WTO tariffs. If that situation were to occur, which we hope it won't, it would have a real detrimental effect on the whole cheddar cheese industry. Now, of course, if it's less than that, it's in a better position, and the industry, the UK is a profitable market. But what it requires us at this point in time is to look at alternatives, to look at, if there's 18% of Irish manufacturing milk going into cheddar cheese, if there was a hard Brexit, what are the alternatives?
And what are the alternatives?
And that's the challenge that we have, I suppose, is that we're scoping out at the moment. The global cheese market is a market of some 20 million tonnes. It's growing in the order of 1.8 to 2% per annum. Now, in its own right, if you bring that down, that's about 400,000 tonnes per annum. So it's the context of where it's growing in terms of Asia's are growing by something like 6-7% per annum, but it's not cheddar. So it's other cheese varieties, and that's all in the melting pot at the moment. In other words, scoping out a landscape now is taking place against the background that if, and I stress if, a hard Brexit was to occur and WTO was to apply.
And are there any specific markets you'd be looking at the moment, or
no? Everything is open. Yeah. Now, the one thing I would say is we're working with, first of all, the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, with Bord Bia, with Enterprise Ireland. Collectively as an industry, we're working together on this because in reality, in the cheddar cheese side, there are 4 players, and on
the Irish market,
4 manufacturers in the Irish market. Yeah.
Just off cheddar for a minute. Butter at the moment, obviously booming. Is this sustainable? The prices that butter are being paid for at the moment?
I think look, while we'd all love it sustainable, right? I don't believe it is. How could it really be? Just think of it. In April, May 2016, which is only 14 months ago, you were dealing with butter at about €2,500 a tonne. And now on the spot market it's over 6. That's not a sustainable market, that's a .com.
Where does the future hold for butter? When do you think this price is going to start slowing down?
Well, like everything, it will be, in an unregulated market now. It's going to be, when supply catches up. That's going to be the issue that's going to bring about a curtailment here. Are going to be in a correction? No, we don't want to see it happening. Don't get me wrong. We all enjoy prices of this, and we strive to do the utmost to maximise returns. But in that kind of a movement, in that sort of a period, you have to say is is that it is hardly sustainable.
Jim Wolf, thank you very, very much.
Thanks.
I'm here with Tara McCarthy, CEO of Bord Bia at the Bord Bia Brexit barometer here in Bord Bia headquarters. Tara, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Anthony.
I suppose one of the figures that I was looking at in your barometer, the publication that you have, is 61% of Irish businesses or agri-food businesses don't have almost a Brexit contingency plan or a marketing plan for the UK. Was there any particular statistic that maybe shocked you more than others?
Well, I guess shocked is a big word on it, but there's a lot of interesting facts in here. You've got 79% of companies who think that there's going to be opportunities for them in the UK, so that's an exciting side to it. But knowing that 85% of them are going to have their competitors based in the UK, and yet there's a tariff scenario coming at us, potentially, where 45% of our companies have no experience of tariffs. So there's a lot of challenges, but what is really good to see is that there's optimism and there's ambition built into those challenges as well. And I guess what really puts focus on all of us now is how hard we have to work to convert that ambition and get over those challenges.
There was a lot of talk about optimism. Just in terms of, I suppose, the pessimist point of view before we talk about optimism, what would be the worst case scenario here?
Well, there's huge challenges here. Worst case scenario is a hard Brexit where you've got tariffs on our products, and a tariff can be on our meat and cheese anything up to 50 to 70%. That's where pessimism will come in. And you similarly, when you coordinate that with the pressure of sterling, where we're currently at 88 pence, or 88 pence, and what we're now looking to see is that companies are calling to us and saying in the Brexit barometer that when it hits 1994, you've got over 80% of our companies who are going to be significantly challenged, because that comes back to costs and being competitive, because effectively the sterling swings are knocking competitiveness out of our industry through no fault of our own. It's just literally from the UK perspective as you look towards that market. And then that means that we have to really focus hard on capturing the value in the market and managing our costs and inputs at home.
Are you optimistic about the future?
Always.
Thank you very much. Anthony Jordan here from the Irish Farmers Journal. I'm here with Catherine Day, former Secretary General of the European Commission. Catherine, you're very, very welcome.
Thank you.
I suppose before we begin, obviously the UK leaving the EU will leave a major hole in the EU's budget. Where do you think, or what should be done to fill this gap in the budget?
Well, I think there are big choices to be made, and yesterday the Commission published a number of scenarios indicating that different choices are possible for the Member States. So the Member States will have to decide in the next 2 years, do we shrink the budget because we've lost one member who contributed 15% of the budget? Do we go forward with a smaller budget? Do we try to live with the same budget, and that means asking Member States to contribute more? Or do we change the way in which we financially support different policies? Do we move away from 100% grant financing to loans rather than grants? Do we ask Member States to co-finance certain policies that they haven't been co-financing up to now? So the aim of the Commission is to launch a debate and to get the Member States to look and see where do we want the EU to spend money, how do we want to channel the money, and then to have a discussion with the Member States about the size of the budget. So at the moment it's a question of listening to different views, deciding where the priorities are, and then next summer the Commission will come out with the formal proposal that will start a formal negotiating round.
Yeah. I suppose UK leaving the EU is almost like Ireland losing its best friend or its main ally. Is there somebody that you believe or somebody in the Member State in the EU that we should kind of be a new ally for Ireland, or who do you think?
I think everybody's going to miss the UK. While it was sometimes an awkward and difficult partner, it also brought an enormous amount to the European Union. So I think it's not only Ireland, but everybody will miss them. I think the good thing about the EU is that you can ally with different countries depending on the topic. So, for example, Ireland and France traditionally are very close allies on agriculture, but there are lots of other areas then where we would ally with maybe some of the smaller countries like the Scandinavians or like the Dutch, or yet again on other issues with some of the southern member states. So because Ireland doesn't belong to any particular obvious grouping, geographical grouping of member states, I think we could be a floating member and that we would be welcome in different groupings depending on what the topic is.
I suppose finally, you talked about kind of financial integration within the EU. Ireland's corporate tax rate, can this survive given the pressure of the UK leaving if there is more integration, as you said, in the EU?
Yes, I think it can, because the union, partly in response to questions from Ireland, has made clear time and time again that any change in taxation rates would have to be decided by unanimity. So that means Ireland would have a veto on any change in policy it didn't like.
Catherine, thank you very, very much.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
On Monday, Irish Farmers Journal livestock specialist Darren Carty was in Ballymena for the National Sheep Association's Northern Ireland event. He asked the NSA's chief executive Phil Stoker about the current challenges for sheep farmers, starting with Brexit.
There's definitely some challenges ahead. You know, most of the problems we got at the moment, I think, is that there are so many unknowns. We just don't know what is around the corner. But there are clearly opportunities too. And what this event and the NSA is all about is trying to help to prepare those farmers to tease out what is likely to happen and make sure their businesses are as sharp as possible and work in the best practice where they can, and that they can succeed in the future.
Sheep sector, I suppose, maybe it's unusual in that it's I suppose it's a risk because of the trading, all the different trading avenues, and that the UK exports meat, it imports meat. What is the NSA pushing for to try and, I suppose, maybe get some solutions for this?
Well, I think that the sheep meat market is a very broad church, and it does include a lot of what you call commodity product that is traded all around the world. And I think, you know, we've got to be focused on making sure that the quality of that is as good as possible, so that we get repeat business. But we've also got to make sure that the costs of production are as low as possible for that market. And that the credentials of that market, be they environmental or animal welfare or whatever it might be, the credentials of that market are as strong as possible. But there is another end of the market too, which is more that niche end, I guess, which is about giving more provenance to the product as well. You know, and you've seen over the last 10, 15 years, I suppose, growth in direct sales and farmers markets and more, you know, provenance labelling and messages about how the product's produced, where it's produced. And if you look at the diversity we've got in the sheep industry, some of those products and those breeds struggling to fit into that commodity specification, there's definitely a scope there to create some more brands or niches within that market to appeal to that sort of interest, really. So we've got to be working right across the spectrum, from that small end niche product that attracts someone who will pay a real premium, right the way through to products that are produced on a commodity level, as cheaply as possible, as efficiently as possible, and as high quality as possible, right the way through.
I suppose we'd be naive to think, or to stand here and think, we heard Murray Roloff there talking about what happened in New Zealand and no subsidies at all. He did also make the point that the UK, Northern Ireland, is a lot different. There will need to be a realisation from government in that there will need to be support for active farmers.
I don't doubt that for a moment. You know, if you look at a lot of the farm business survey work, you know, a lot of our businesses are 50%, 70%, even higher in some cases, reliant on, I don't know, public income in one way or another, really. I hesitate to call it subsidy, but, you know, basic payment or agri-environment schemes and all sorts. And the simple truth is that they will not survive if that is just taken away. To replace that amount of money through increased income from the enterprise is just unrealistic, really. So there needs to be I think that case has been made, really, that the sector will not survive, or there'll be huge disruption if that money would be withdrawn. And I think there is recognition that, you know, sheep farm is not all about just producing a protein from the farm, you know, lamb from the farm. You know, it is closely connected to the landscape and the environment and creation of habitats that birds and mammals and all sorts of things live alongside, you know. And then there's the carbon capture in the soil and the way we manage our water. So, you know, I would like to see a system whereby farmers, the costings of their enterprise were ring-fenced in a way, so that enterprise was driven to be as financially viable and as keen and mean as it possibly can be, but also for farmers to be then recognised and rewarded for all the other things that they provide for the public that can be rewarded through the marketplace. You know, so I think there is a strong justification for ongoing payments, but it's going to be for the sorts of things that the public like and want to see.
Yep. Ultimately, you want to be in a position where farmers can turn a little profit to be able to invest and to be able to sustain livelihood, but also that it makes it appealing for younger people, because we are going into where we have an ageing profile as well, and that's probably something you're seeing right across the UK.
Yeah, we are actually, and to be honest, if you go to a lot of our NSA events and many other events, sheep farming events, there's no shortage of youngsters showing an interest in this sector and coming in, but we've got the same old challenges with the existing guys, that we've got to make sure that it's successful and viable and rewarding for everyone. And if it is, it'll attract those youngsters in.
Well, Phil, we wish you all the best in future events and commend you on doing a good job again today.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Finally, let's travel to Malta with Mary Phelan, who writes about the Mediterranean island in this week's Irish Country Living. She shared her experience with Aisling Hussey.
I absolutely loved Malta, and I have to say that I don't really know why I don't hear more people, Irish people, raving about the place. It's not somewhere that I knew much about before going, apart from what you had told me, and I was actually just blown away by it. I mean, it's a sun-soaked island in the middle of the Mediterranean, so really, what is there not to love? But it was kind of all the other stuff that really surprised me. Like, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. All of the old buildings, particularly around Valletta, the kind of the beige stone kind of the fortress, I guess, which perimeters Valletta, that looks out onto the sea. So the contrast of the colour of the buildings with the sea and both the sky. I just thought it was absolutely gorgeous.
And you're most impressed by the history of Malta. Like, it's been occupied, I think, by like every single country in the world, basically.
Yeah, it seems to have been invaded by everyone. And I guess when I just mentioned Valletta there, which is the capital city, it's been described as a city built by gentlemen for gentlemen, but it also kind of exudes this power and might. And I guess that's what I meant when I talked about the fortresses. They're these big, great, imposing walls, and they have batteries and entrenchments, and really Valletta kind of sits there overlooking the harbour as if it's ready to defend itself, and really it's had to defend itself so many times because, as you say, the island has been invaded by absolutely everyone. In 218 BC the Romans arrived, then the Byzantines in 395. In 870 the Arabs occupied Malta, so they have left their influence on the language. So it's a European language, but it does sound a bit
it's a bit. I think it's the only Semitic language with like a Latin script.
Okay.
Fun facts about Malta.
What it is, it doesn't sound like your typical Spanish or French or Italian.
Yeah, because Malta is just off the coast of Sicily. Like, a lot of people might know that, but it's because it's so tiny, you wouldn't even see it on the map, but like you would think it's kind of more Italian than
and really I felt the Italian influence in terms of the food. So there was just pasta for days. I ate pasta every single day I was there, particularly ravioli, and it's all the balsamic vinegar and the oil and the bread and tomatoes and mozzarella cheese
and the focaccia and everything.
Yes,
my God.
If you want a hit of Italian cuisine, but maybe have been to Italy already, definitely try Malta. You'll get your fix of pasta there. But after the Arabs, the Normans arrived. That was in 190. Then the Germans in 1194, the English in 1266, the Spanish in 1283. I mean, I'm not even mentioning everyone that's invaded the place. So, but I guess, and you'll identify with this, probably the most well-known occupiers of Malta were the Order of the Knights of St. John of Malta. And I'm slightly confused by their role in that they were drawn from noble families, but they're a religious order who also became a military order, so they're kind of a bit different compared to your average occupier.
Yeah, you can see the influence of knights like everywhere, like even in their flag and like all the souvenir shops anyway will
exactly
have, like,
if you're bringing home trinkets for family or friends from Malta, it's usually the knights. And then they were kicked out, I think it was the late 1700s. Napoleon came in. Then in 1814 Malta became a British Crown colony, and it achieved independence within the British Commonwealth in 1964, became a republic in 1974, and joined the EU in 2004. And that is just very brief. It mightn't have sounded brief, but that was a brief synopsis of all the different peoples, I guess, that have been on the island.
And like the amazing thing about it is you can see the influence everywhere, like especially in Valletta you can see the French influence in the architecture, you can see the Turkish influence. Like it's like a melting pot of like
it really is. Yeah, and it's full of absolutely beautiful buildings. I mean, the silent city of Medina, for example, is really worth a walk through. You know, it has this mix of medieval and Baroque architecture, but I really loved the old Parliament building in Valletta as well, which our tour guide described to us as the most beautiful building in Valletta. But I saw lots of beautiful buildings, but that's particularly nice.
And you're talking about food there. When I was over there a couple of years ago, it was really cheap to eat and drink there. Is that still the case, do you think? Or?
I didn't, because some people had said that to me. Oh, you know, you'll notice that it's quite cheap. I thought the prices weren't, I didn't think it was very expensive, but I didn't notice that it was substantially cheaper than Ireland at the same time. So it's not somewhere, from what I saw, that I'd be saying to go to because the prices are much cheaper, but it wasn't ridiculously expensive by the same token.
And the one thing I'd say if you're going out there, it's not a real beach holiday location, I would say.
Yeah, this is something that I heard from people before going over. Oh, there aren't really any beaches in Malta, it's not really known for its beaches. And I did see some small little bays and some small little beaches. If you want to sunbathe on a beach, you will definitely find a beach to sunbathe on. It just doesn't have these big long strands or beaches that go on for miles, and they really are more bays and they're quite small. But at the same time, I was actually doing a bit of Googling about beaches in Malta, and there is Visit Malta. The tourism website has a very comprehensive overview of all the beaches there, and I was actually surprised when they were listed kind of one after the other that there did seem to be a good range of them, and some of them were a bit bigger than I expected, so maybe I kind of didn't see them firsthand on my trip. But kind of around the harbour, when I was in Salima, people were kind of sunbathing on the kind of stone rock beside the harbour. There doesn't need to be a shortage of places to sunbathe anyway.
Yeah, there's no shortage of sun there either.
Yeah.
And what was the most stunning place you visited in Malta?
I have to say that I was blown away by St. John's Cathedral. You go in and everything is gold. It's so ornate. This was commissioned by the Knights once again, and what I was really surprised by is that there's actually 2 Caravaggio paintings in there, which I didn't know before walking in, so that was a ridiculously pleasant surprise. And the more stunning of the 2 is the beheading of St. John the Baptist. So you kind of go into a room and it's just there in front of you, and it's huge, and it's the only painting that Caravaggio ever signed as well, so it's just really stunning. But I couldn't take a picture to show my family and friends at home because they don't allow you to take pictures, so I couldn't put it on Instagram, which I was very disappointed about. But it's one of those things that you do have to see it in real life to appreciate it anyway. It's absolutely stunning. So do not go to Malta and come home without having gone to St. John's Cathedral.
And would you recommend Malta for families or couples or, you know, girly holidays? What do you think?
I actually think that Malta is for everyone. So if you're a kind of group of young single people, you know, there is meant to be a great party atmosphere in St. Julian's. I know that I didn't get to party, but in your student days it seems to be quite the place to go out. So it seems to have that side of it. I think for anyone who enjoys culture and history, there's tons of it in Malta. So if you're looking for, maybe you're in a couple and one of you just wants to lie in the sun and the other really wants to see loads of history and culture, Malta is the perfect destination. And apparently there's absolutely loads to do for families as well. So there's actually a Popeye park.
Oh yeah. And where Popeye was filmed.
Yes, in the 70s I think. And then also Gozo is another island, and that's worth a trip, and that's on the ferry, you know, 25 minutes on a ferry. Kids would love that. And so I'm not kind of exaggerating saying this, but I think there's something there for everyone.
And I think after this podcast, the Maltese Tourism Board should give us like a cut of their profits for next year.
Or just bring me back to Malta.
Or bring me back to Malta.
Yes, definitely. So you can read all about that in this week's Country Living.
Great. Thanks, Mary.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.